Okay. Ve'ela todos bnei Noach. These are the generations of Noach. Shem, Cham, Vayafes, Vayibaldu lahem banim achar hamabul. And they bore children after the flood. It just sounds like an interesting fact to put in. They bore children after the flood. Okay, sounds good. What would I have thought otherwise? I mean, we said which children came on with Noah. Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. Vatam vayivoldu lahem banim achar hamabul. Lirmos. This alludes ki afal pi shayu ru'uyim lebanim kodem hamabul. They were old enough to bear children before the flood. Ki derech hadoros hahem laholid kibnei shishim. It was normal in those times that when a person was 60 years old, again, the whole physical development, age, everything was very different in those times. But in any event, it was normal for people to bear children around the age of 60. So it would have been logical for them to have children before the flood. Nevertheless, they didn't have children before the flood. Elu lo noldu lahem gam lemeya rak achar hamabul. Even though they were as old as 100 before the flood, they still did not have children before the flood. Kavash Hashem es mayanam. God made it that they couldn't reproduce. Shelo yolidu v'yoved b'mabul. Because what would have happened if they would have had children? It could very well be that those children wouldn't have merited to be saved with the rest of them, so that they would have had children that would have passed because of the timing of things. We're talking about Noah's children, the grandchildren of Noah. So God delayed the births of the grandchildren of Noah until after the flood. Or, it was very nice that the ark worked in such a miraculous manner, but maybe we don't need to have as many people as possible on the ark. So in other words, whether it be to literally save their lives, whether it be to just make it a little more logistically feasible in the Teva, for either reason, God specifically held off childbearing for them until after the flood. Really interesting. The Ramban says, if you look at the generations back, Lemech delayed much more than others in having children. Noach delayed more than others in having children. And only because of all of that did it work out in the years for it to just be Noach and his children at the time of the flood. Just a very interesting Ramban to think about. Okay, let's go on to verse 9. As we've been going through, maybe let's start with verse 8. As we've been going through the generations of the descendants of Noach, V'chush yoladas Nimrod, Cush bore Nimrod, Hu heichel lios gibor ba'aretz. So Nimrod began to be a warrior in the land. Verse 9, Hu haya gibor tzayid lifnei Hashem. He was a warrior hunter before God, just translating it literally, a strong hunter, a fierce hunter. And therefore, so much so that it's even said, when we describe others in that way, like the ultimate barometer is like Nimrod, to be a Gibor Tzayid like Nimrod. It's a very interesting phrase. Gibor Tzayid is not complicated. Gibor Tzayid just seems to be a hunter. But what does it mean he was a hunter before God? What does that phrase mean? Tes in the Ramban. Gibor Tzayid Lifnei Hashem. Sod daton shobrios befiv umataan limrod b'makom. So he starts off by citing Rashi. The Rashi says that he hunted or trapped the mindset of people with his mouth, and he convinced them to rebel against God. So we don't mean he was a hunter. We mean he would entrap people with his mouth. He convinced people of things. By the way, there's a very famous medrash like that about Esav, that Esav was involved with Sayid, which means, that Yitzchak loved Esav Sayid b'fiv. There was game in his mouth. So the standard pshat is that Esav would bring a lot of meat to Yitzchak. But there's another pshat that Rashi brings down, that Esav was trapping with his mouth. He would trick Yitzchak. He gave Yitzchak a different impression of things, of who he was. In any event, Rashi's saying a similar pshat here. Nimrod was a trapper before God, meaning he convinced people to turn away from God. Al Kain Yomar, therefore it is said, Al Kol Adam Marshia Ba'azus Panim, V'Odea Ribono Miskavin Nimrod Bo. When we're trying to capture someone, we're trying to describe someone who acts with tremendous audacity before God and knows who his master is, knows who his creator is, and anyway decides to rebel against him. Yom Yeyomer Zeh Nimrod. So this is Rashi's pshat, and according to Rashi's pshat, therefore it is said that people are a gibor tzayid l'fnei Hashem like Nimrod, not the biggest compliment around. It means, wow, you're so wicked and so audacious in your relationship with God. You understand God, you're still not doing the right things, maybe even convincing others to do the wrong things. You're like Nimrod. That's Rashi's pshat. Going further, Vervi Avram Piresh Hefechin, Derech Pshuto. The Ibn Ezra says the other way around. Kyuhechel Lios Gibor Alachayos Latsuno son. The Ibn Ezra, who again in general, the Ibn Ezra's approach is much more literal. The Ibn Ezra says, what are you talking about? It means he was good at trapping animals. He was good at hunting animals. He was a Gibor Tzayid. Upiresh L'fnei Hashem. What does it mean? He was a hunter before God. So Rashi says it means he was tricking people about God. But if, according to Ibn Ezra, it's about hunting animals, what does it mean before God? He would trap these animals, and you think he would just eat all the animals? No, he would bring sacrifices before God. So it's the exact opposite of Rashi's pshat. According to Ibn Ezra, he served God through his hunting because he would hunt animals, etc., and bring korbanos. Says the Ramban, Vein Dvar of Niran. I don't think that's the right pshat. Says the Ramban, V'neu Matzdik Rasha, Kiabosenu Yadu Risho B'Kabbalah. The Ramban says, look at the rabbinic literature about Nimrod. They're not terribly complimentary of Nimrod. According to the Ibn Ezra's pshat, Nimrod was one fine fellow. So the Ramban says it's a strange pshat to say. The Ramban says, I think the pshat is he began to govern through his force over people. He was the first real ruler. Until the times of Nimrod, there weren't wars. And there weren't people who would have monarchies. And he imposed himself upon the upon the people of Babel to the extent that he ruled over them. And then he went to Ashur. And then he did his thing over there. And he built these big, strong, fortified cities. So it goes on in the next pasuk, the next pasuk to talk about his cities that he took. What it really means is Nimrod was the first king, and he really built himself an empire. That's what the Ramban explains. So presumably what it means, Lifnei Hashem, is he would present himself as the true ruler of the world. In other words, so Rashi says it means that he would turn people away from the theology of God. The Ibn Ezra says it means that he was a hunter and he would bring his game as offerings to God. The Ramban says it's sort of like a combination of the two. He would entrap people, but not about God. He would entrap people about himself. He would convince people that he was the person they should follow. And he did that with Lifnei Hashem, which again we're saying means that he tried to gain great honor and admiration from other people, and he was the true world power and not God. That seems to be the way the Ramban explains it. Okay, let's jump ahead. Goal now is to explain the Tower of Babel in 2.5 minutes. That was a joke, but we'll just at least see a snippet or two. I personally don't think it's terribly impressive to the idea of someone talking and other people not understanding them. It happens to me all the time. So chapter 11, verse 3. Chapter 11, verse 3. Vayomru ishare'ehu. So there were all these people who had gathered in a valley, and they said, one to his friend, let's construct bricks. They had bricks acting as stone and mortar. Verse 4, then they said, let's build a city with a tower going up to heaven, and let's make for ourselves a name, lest we be spread out over the entire land. There's a lot of interesting things over here, but just to take a moment or two. Both verses 3 and 4 begin with what they said. Are these the same people speaking? Are these different people speaking? By the way, verse 3 says, this one said to his friend. Verse 4 said, they said. This, even if it's the same speaker, is it the same audience? Is it a different audience? It's a lot to think about in these psukim. I want to see a few sfornos. Sforno pasuk gimel. Hava nilban alavenim. Livnos batim v'gidros tzon. When they said, let's make these bricks and build, they were looking to build houses and pens for their sheep. This was like a very concrete, practical piece of advice. Sforno says, verse 3 is very practical stuff. Each one said to his friend, you need a place to live. I need a place to live. You have sheep you need to take care of. I have sheep. Let's just do something together. Let's figure it out. Let's build houses. Let's make these bricks. Let's build houses. The next Sforno pasuk daled vayomru havanivla here. Zos hoisa atza sarei hadur lahamlichas nimrod al kol haminu anoshi. Verse 4 says the Sforno is a totally different group of speakers. Verse 3 is every man. Verse 4 is the leaders of the community, the officers of the community. They had these big aspirations. So in verse 3, it's just people wanted a place to live, houses. Verse 4 is people said, let's give Nimrod real fame and glory. And through him, we by extension will be very connected to Nimrod, and he will be the ruler of the world. We'll have a tower with its head going up to the heavens, and we'll make a name for ourselves. Nasa Shem, let's make a name for ourselves. Shatia b'migdal, there'll be this name with the tower. V'yetze b'chol minu anoshi shem gova makoma v'godol ira. We will be famous. We will be the highest tower in the world. People will know our tower, and people will know us because we are the city of that tower. Elokim. Eitzel kol b'nei ha'adam, the same way that people think of God, people will think of us. We will be the beacon that people will turn to. They'll want to see what we did. They'll want to ask our guidance for things. The intent being that whoever would govern over that city, Yimloch al kol amina enoshi biyos sham drishas kulam. That will be the center of human society. And everybody will look to our city, and everybody will look to our king, and our king will indeed be the master of the world. And that's just an interesting picture. There's so much more said in the Mefarshim of these psukim. This is just at least one perspective. So we saw the Ramban about the pasuk that emphasizes that the grandchildren of Noach were born after the flood. We saw different commentaries describe what it means that Nimrod was a hunter before God. And we saw the Sforno trying to lay the groundwork for the intent of the people who built the Tower of Babel.